All right, let's talk about one of the most famous and honestly one of the most misunderstood ideas in all of psychology, IQ. It's a term we've all heard, a number that gets thrown around, but very few of us actually know what it means.
Right? Like you hear someone has an IQ of 130. Does that mean they're a genius? Does it guarantee they'll be successful? Or is it just, a number from a test? What does that score actually tell us about a person? Well, that's exactly what we're going to unpack today. Okay, let's dive right in. To really get to the bottom of this, we have to start at the very beginning. What even is IQ? Where did this whole idea come from? And how did it become what it is today?
So here's the number one thing you got to get. An IQ score isn't some physical thing we're measuring in your brain like your height or weight. It's a comparative score. That's the key word. All it does is tell you how you performed on a specific set of tasks compared to a whole bunch of other people who are your same age.
And the funny thing is, this whole thing started with a really good intention. Back in the early 1900s, a guy named Alfred Binet just wanted a simple way to figure out which kids in school needed a little extra help. But then, a little later, William Stern took that idea and turned it into a formula, and that's where the intelligence quotient was born. Fast forward to today, and we don't even use that simple formula anymore. Now, it's all about something called a deviation score, which sounds complicated, but it's really just about how far your score is from the average.
And to understand that whole average thing, we need to talk about the bell curve. This shape, this idea, is pretty much the statistical backbone for every single modern IQ test out there.
And this chart shows you exactly how it works. Just look at that big chunk in the middle. About 68% of everyone, that's most of us, will score somewhere in that average range, between 85 and 115. So that score of 130 we asked about, that puts someone way over on the right, in the top 2% of the population. They're basically 2 standard deviations above the average. And what's the dead center of this whole system? The number 100. There's absolutely nothing magical about it. Psychologists literally just decided, okay, 100 is the average. That's it. It's the anchor point, and every other score is just measured based on how far away it is from that middle mark. So we've established it's a comparative score, and it's all based on this bell curve. But what is the test actually measuring? This is where things get really interesting, because we have to understand that IQ is, at the same time, a powerful tool, but also a very, very limited one. Just look at this breakdown. IQ tests are fantastic at measuring things like your ability to spot patterns, your working memory, how quickly your brain can process information. But look at what's on the other side. Creativity, emotional intelligence, practical street smarts, things like your motivation, your wisdom, your morality, none of that is on the test. And you could argue those things are just as crucial for living a good life, right?
This is probably the best analogy I've ever heard for it. Think of it like a computer. Your IQ score might tell you how fast your mental processor is, but it tells you absolutely nothing about the software you're running on it, your personality, your knowledge, your kindness, your common sense.
Now that being said, we can't just throw the whole idea out. That processor speed really does matter in some areas. There are decades of research showing that, on average, higher IQ scores are a strong predictor of success in school, performance in really complex jobs, and just how fast you can learn something new. So, if it's such a powerful predictor, where does it even come from? Are you just born with it, or is it something you learn? And what happens when a tool like this gets into the wrong hands? This brings us to the messy intersection of our genes, our environment, and the pretty controversial history of IQ testing itself. All right, this is a really important point. Twin studies and other family studies show that our genes account for somewhere between 50 to 80% of the variation in IQ scores across the population. Now, that's a super tricky concept. It doesn't mean 80% of your IQ is genetic. It means that genetics explains a lot of the differences we see between people. Because, as you can see, there's another massive piece of the puzzle.
And that piece is your environment. I mean, everything from your nutrition as a kid, to the quality of your education, to your health, it all has a huge impact. You can think of it like this. Your genes might set the potential range for your IQ, but it's your environment that plays a huge role in determining where you actually end up on that scale.
And now, we really do have to talk about the dark side of this. Because this tool, which was first designed to help kids, was pretty quickly twisted and used for some truly awful things.
I mean, seriously, IQ scores were used to push the eugenics movement, justifying horrific practices like forced sterilization. They were used to create racist immigration policies, where they'd test someone who didn't speak a word of English,
in English, and then used the bad score to call them unfit. It was used to separate kids in school, which often just created these self-fulfilling prophecies. The tool itself might be neutral, but the way it was used was anything but.
Okay, so knowing all that, the limitations, and the dark history, let's try to move beyond the score. It's time to bust a few myths and really start looking at the much bigger, much more interesting picture of what human intelligence is all about.
So you've probably seen this online, right? Headlines about someone with a supposed IQ of 200 or even higher. Let's take one of these wild claims. Is an IQ score of 276 even scientifically possible?
The answer? It's a clear, definitive no. Absolutely not. And here's the simple reason why. Real, official, standardized IQ tests, the kind that are actually scientifically valid, they don't even have a scale that goes that high. They pretty much stop being meaningful around a score of 160. Anything higher than that is basically a statistical fantasy. It's a made-up number, usually from some sketchy online quiz, not from a real psychological assessment. That number is, scientifically speaking, completely meaningless.
And hey, while we're busting myths, let's tackle a few more. First off, is your IQ fixed for life? Nope. It's pretty stable, but it can definitely change, especially when you're young. Does a high IQ guarantee you'll be successful? No way. Success takes discipline, creativity, people skills, so much more. And are those online tests accurate? Absolutely not. Real IQ tests are long, detailed, and given by a trained professional. And this really gets to the heart of it all. Being smart is so much bigger than what one test can measure. Think about practical intelligence, what we call street smarts, the ability to just figure things out in the real world. Or creative intelligence, the spark that lets you come up with something totally new. And maybe the most important of all, emotional intelligence, or EQ. Understanding yourself, understanding other people, these are all crucial forms of intelligence.
So at the end of the day, that's really the big takeaway here. An IQ score can be a helpful little snapshot. It gives us a clue about a person's abstract reasoning skills. But that's all it is. It's just one small part of the vast, complex, and frankly beautiful thing we call human intelligence.